Why would a woman from a respected Boston family be running through the dusty streets of a Wild West town with gunmen on her trail? That was the question that hung in the air the evening Fiona Mitchell's life changed forever. Gunshots rang out across Promise Creek in Montana Territory as Fiona ran, her heart beating wildly. The town that was supposed to protect her had turned into a trap. Her long auburn hair flew behind her as she held a small leather journal tight against her chest. That journal was the reason men wanted her dead. "You can't run forever, Mitchell," a rough voice shouted. A bullet struck a wooden post just inches from her head. Fiona ducked into a narrow alley, gasping for breath. Just 3 months earlier, she had been a schoolteacher in Boston with a quiet and comfortable life. Now she was a fugitive because she had written the truth. Her fiancé in Boston, Frederick Carrington, worked with powerful men from the Western Continental Railroad. When Fiona learned about the bribes, lies, and land stolen from innocent families, she wrote everything down. She thought truth would protect her. Instead, it made her a target. She ran toward the town's livery stable and slipped inside. The smell of hay and horses helped calm her shaking hands. Before she could hide, a tall man stepped out of the shadows. He wore a long, dusty coat, a hat pulled low, and his boots were covered in trail dust. "You look like you're in trouble, ma'am," he said in a calm, steady voice. "Please," Fiona whispered, "they are trying to kill me." The man looked at her closely, his eyes a clear and striking shade of blue. He did not waste time asking questions. He picked up a saddle and threw it on a horse. "Can you ride?" he asked. Fiona nodded. She had grown up riding horses, though that life felt far away now. "Name's Luke Yates. Most call me Luke," he said as he helped her onto a second horse. Fiona mounted quickly. The voices of the armed men grew louder. Luke pulled his horse beside hers. "Keep your head down. Follow me. Whatever you're running from, they'll have to go through me first." Quote, They rode out the back of the livery. Just as the gunmen reached the front, Luke led them into the foothills outside of town. They rode for hours over rough ground. Fiona's legs ached, and her hand shook from holding the reins so tightly, but Luke never slowed until the sun began to sink behind the mountains. "We should be safe here for now," he said as they stopped near a quiet creek and cottonwood trees. "Railroad hired guns don't follow riders into these hills after dark." When Fiona stepped down from her horse, her legs felt weak. "Why are you helping me? You do not even know me." Luke took care of the horses before he answered. "I know the kind of men who chase you. Railroad men with guns don't go after harmless folks." Fiona held her journal close. "I wrote about things I was not supposed to know. Bribes. Families forced off land. Settlements burned so tracks could be built. Those men do not forgive anyone who speaks the truth." Luke's jaw tightened. "Western Continental Railroad," he said in a low voice. "They took my brother's life. I've been following their trail for a long time." Fiona looked at him with surprise. "Your brother?" Quote, "Daniel Yates," Luke said. "He owned a small ranch along the railroad line. He refused to sell. They said he died in a horse accident. But Daniel could ride anything that walked on 4 legs. It was no accident." A heavy silence settled between them. Luke gathered firewood and built a small fire. The night grew cold, but the warm flames made Fiona feel safe for the first time in months. She watched Luke as he poured coffee and heated beans over the fire. He moved like a man who had slept under the stars many nights. "You are not just a cowboy, are you?" she asked softly. Luke gave a slight smile. "I was a soldier in the war. A lawman after that. Now I help where I can." "A guardian angel in dusty boots," Fiona said with a small smile. Luke laughed, the sound warm and genuine. "I ain't no angel, Miss Mitchell. I just know right from wrong, and what the railroad is doing is wrong." For the first time in months, Fiona felt something like hope. She slept by the fire with her back to a log, and Luke stayed awake to watch for danger. Even the dark night felt less frightening with him nearby. Morning came with soft sunlight and the smell of coffee. Luke was already awake, looking over a worn map. "There's a ranch 2 days from here. A friend of mine owns it. We will be safe there while we plan our next move." "You are risking your life for me," Fiona said. Luke looked at her with calm, steady eyes. "You did not ask for help. I offered it, and I have my own score to settle with the railroad." They rode deeper into the mountains that day. Luke taught Fiona how to move across land without leaving a clear trail. They stopped by a spring for water and food. Sitting in the shade of a pine tree, Luke asked about her life before all of this. Fiona told him about being a teacher in Boston, about her wealthy family, and how she was expected to live a quiet, polite life. It felt strange to talk about that world now. "I never imagined I would be running for my life with proof of crimes in my journal." Luke listened closely. "You are braver than most," he said. Fiona looked at him. "Or foolish." "Sometimes they are the same," Luke replied. That night, they camped again with only a small fire hidden behind rocks. While Luke kept watch, Fiona wrote in her journal. She wanted a record of what was happening in case she did not survive. "You should sleep," Luke said gently when he saw her writing. "If something happens to me, there needs to be a record," she said. "We will face whatever comes together," Luke said. "I won't leave you." His voice was steady, and Fiona believed him. She closed her journal and rested. With Luke nearby, she felt safer than she had in a long time. As she lay under the stars, she held on to one thought. Maybe, just maybe, the peace she had lost was not gone forever. The next morning, Luke and Fiona rode through narrow mountain paths, the air crisp and cool around them. By noon, the land began to open into a valley. A small cabin sat beside a stream, with a barn and corral nearby. Smoke rose from the chimney. It looked peaceful, like danger could never reach such a place. "That's Jacob's ranch," Luke said. "We'll be safe here." As they rode toward the cabin, a man stepped out holding a rifle. He was older than Luke, with a silver beard and steady eyes. "That's you, Yates," the man called out. "It's me," Luke answered, "and I brought someone who needs help." Jacob lowered the rifle. "Any friend of yours is welcome. Bring her inside." Inside the warm cabin, Jacob put food on the table: bread, dried meat, and berries. Fiona ate slowly, her body tired from days of running and fear. Luke explained everything. "Fiona has evidence of the railroad's crimes. She needs a safe place until we can get the papers to someone who will act on them." Jacob looked at Fiona with respect. "You must be a strong woman to stand up to those men." "I don't feel strong," she admitted, "just scared." Jacob nodded. "Being strong doesn't mean you're never scared. It means you keep going anyway." He showed Fiona to a small bedroom. "My daughter used to sleep here before she married and moved away." For the first time in weeks, Fiona slept in a real bed. She expected nightmares, but she slept deeply. When she woke, sunlight shone through the curtains. For a moment, she forgot about danger. She felt safe. Later, Fiona helped Jacob in the kitchen while Luke and Jacob's son, Eli, worked outside. Jacob spoke quietly as they kneaded dough. "Luke's a good man," Jacob said. "Carries a lot on his heart, more than he lets on." "He saved my life," Fiona replied. Jacob smiled. "He's looking at you like a man who finally sees a light after a long night. I haven't seen him look that way in a long time." Fiona felt warmth rise in her cheeks. "You're mistaken. We don't know each other well." "Sometimes the heart knows faster than the mind," Jacob said gently. That afternoon, Eli prepared to leave for Bozeman to send a coded telegram to a federal marshal, someone Luke trusted. The message would warn him and ask for help. Fiona handed Eli a sealed letter. "If something happens to me, please send this to my friend in Boston. She needs to know the truth." Later that evening, Luke and Jacob spread maps on the table. Fiona joined them. "We need to reach Helena," Luke said. "That's where the federal marshal is. He's honest. If these documents reach him, he'll act." "But the railroad will be watching the main roads," Jacob warned. Fiona took a breath. "What if we travel disguised?" "As a family." Luke looked at her in surprise. "You mean pretend to be husband and wife?" "It would draw less suspicion than a man and woman traveling alone," she said softly. Jacob nodded. "It could work." I have clothes that'll make you look settled, not like someone on the run. Luke agreed, but looked at Fiona with careful eyes. It's just a disguise, nothing improper. Of course, she said quickly, though her heart fluttered at the thought. They planned to leave at dawn in Jacob's old covered wagon, looking like a married couple on a simple trip. Fiona slept lightly that night, her mind full of thoughts she did not dare speak. When morning came, she dressed in a simple brown dress that had belonged to Jacob's late wife. Luke met her outside. He wore a clean shirt, vest, and trousers, not the clothing of a drifting cowboy, but of a respectable husband. You look, Luke paused, like you belong to a peaceful life. Fiona smiled. So do you. They began their journey as Mr. and Mrs. Wilson, heading toward Helena. At first, they rode in silence, both unsure how to act. Later, Luke spoke. We should practice being married, in case someone asks. Where did we meet? Fiona asked. At a church gathering, Luke answered without hesitation. You were the new school teacher. I was working as a ranch foreman. I fell in love right away. Fiona's heart skipped. And why did I accept your proposal? Luke glanced at her, his voice gentle. Because you saw a man who would cherish and protect you. They continued crafting their story as if it were real. It felt surprisingly natural. That night, a storm forced them to take shelter in the wagon. Rain poured loudly, thunder shook the ground, and lightning lit the sky. Huddled together inside, they talked softly. The storm outside made the small space feel even closer. At one moment, their eyes met in the dim light. Something unspoken passed between them, something warm and frightening all at once. Before either could say a word, a sudden crash of thunder sent the horses into panic. Luke ran out into the rain to calm them. When he returned, soaked to the skin, Fiona handed him a blanket. He changed behind her while she faced the other way. When he lay beside her to sleep, they kept a respectful distance at first, but as the cold night deepened, they drifted closer for warmth. By morning, she woke with his arm around her and her head resting on his chest. For a few heartbeats, neither moved. In that quiet moment, Fiona understood how easy it would be to lose her heart to him. They continued their journey the next day. They stopped at a trading post to buy supplies, staying in character as husband and wife. But as they left, the shopkeeper mentioned railroad men were searching for a woman with red hair. They're ahead of us, Fiona said in fear. We'll be careful, Luke assured her. We stick to our story. We stay together. Quote, they left the main road and took a smaller, hidden route. That evening at camp, Fiona's voice trembled as she spoke. What if they find us? I can't let those papers fall into their hands. Then we'll split them, Luke said. Half with you, half with me. If something happens, at least one of us can finish this. They hid their share of documents in separate places on their bodies. When Fiona finished securing hers, she looked at Luke. Luke, if we reach Helena and this ends, what happens to us? To you and me? Luke held her eyes for a long moment. That depends on what you want, he said softly. Do you want me to go back to Boston? Fiona shook her head slowly. No, there is nothing for me there anymore. Luke's voice dropped to a whisper. Then stay with me. He leaned closer, and Fiona didn't pull away. Their lips met in a soft, almost unsure kiss, then with a deeper, certain one that left her breathless. They fell asleep in each other's arms, no longer pretending. They did not know danger was waiting ahead, and it was closer than they thought. Wait, before we move on, what do you think about the story so far? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'm really curious to know. The morning sun warmed the wagon cover as Luke and Fiona continued their journey toward Helena. The world around them looked calm, but they both knew danger could appear at any turn. Still, their hearts felt lighter after the night they shared, and they rode with new strength and purpose. By midday, they reached a small valley with a handful of buildings and a weathered sign that read, Prosperity. The town looked worn and far too quiet. Some windows were boarded, and a few people stood watching with guarded eyes. I don't like this place, Luke said under his breath. Stay close. Remember, we're the Wilsons. They guided the wagon down the main street, trying to appear like simple travelers. Fiona kept her bonnet low, hiding most of her hair. They were just reaching the end of the street when a voice called out sharply, "Hold up there!" Luke stopped the wagon. The deputy they'd met on the road the day before walked toward them, hand resting on his gun. Behind him came a well-dressed man Fiona recognized at once. Her heart sank. Thomas Whitfield. He had been Frederick's fellow lawyer in Boston. He was one of the men behind the railroad's corruption. Whitfield pointed at Fiona with a cold smile. "That's her. Hair's different, but that is Fiona Mitchell." Luke stepped protectively in front of her. "You're mistaken. This is my wife, Fiona Wilson." Whitfield laughed. "Spare me the act. We've been tracking her. She stole private company papers. She's coming with us, and so are you." Deputy Crawford drew his revolver. "Hands up." Fiona's heart hammered. Luke's body tensed beside her, ready to fight, but the odds were against them. Just then, a strong voice rang out across the street. "Lower your weapon, Crawford." Everyone turned. A tall man approached wearing a federal badge. Behind him were two deputies, Marshal Hawkins. Luke breathed, relief filling his voice. Whitfield stiffened. "This is a railroad matter. You have no authority here." "When it involves bribery, land theft, and murder across state lines, it becomes my authority," Hawkins replied. "Step aside." Crawford hesitated, then lowered his gun. Fiona stepped forward. "Marshal, we have the documents." Luke took his share from his Bible. Fiona removed hers from the lining of her boot. Hawkins quickly scanned the pages, his face growing darker with each one. "It's enough," he said firmly. "Whitfield, you're under arrest. Deputy Crawford, you too. You can explain your involvement with the railroad to a federal judge." Within the hour, Whitfield and Crawford were jailed, and the town breathed a little easier. Hawkins escorted Luke and Fiona to a small room behind the general store that he was using as an office. "You did brave work, Miss Mitchell," Hawkins said. "Your evidence will help bring justice to a lot of families." Fiona swallowed, tears filling her eyes. "Will it stop the railroad from hurting more people?" "It will slow them down," Hawkins answered, "and it will hold the men behind this accountable. That's a start." Luke placed his hand over Fiona's. "My brother can finally rest." Hawkins nodded. "I'll take you both to Helena tomorrow. You'll be safe there." That night, in a small room at Prosperity's boarding house, the weight of the past months finally eased. Fiona sat on the edge of the bed while Luke knelt in front of her. "It's almost over," she whispered. "I thought I'd be running forever." "You're not running anymore," Luke said softly. "You stood and fought." She met his eyes. "I didn't do it alone." He held her hands, his thumb brushing over her fingers. "Fiona, when this is done, I don't want you to disappear from my life. Not back to Boston, not anywhere." She felt her heart open at his words. "Where would I go?" Quote. Luke smiled gently. "With me." She leaned forward and kissed him, knowing she had found where she truly belonged. 2 days later, they reached Helena. Hawkins arranged protection, and Fiona spent the next week giving full testimony. News spread quickly, and soon arrests were happening across state lines. Even Frederick Carrington was taken into custody in Boston. One evening, after all statements were given and the danger had eased, Luke took Fiona to dinner in a quiet restaurant. Lanterns glowed softly, and the room was filled with gentle music. When the meal ended, Luke reached across the table and took her hand. "Fiona, these last weeks showed me what matters in this life. I don't want to pretend anymore." He stood, pulled a small ring from his pocket, and knelt. "My life was nothing but drifting and loss until you crossed my path. You brought purpose back into my days and peace into my nights. I love you. Will you marry me for real this time?" Tears ran down Fiona's cheeks as she nodded. "Yes, Luke. Yes." The restaurant burst into warm applause as he slipped the ring onto her finger. 3 weeks later, they married in Jacob's quiet valley. Wildflowers decorated the small clearing. Marshal Hawkins stood proudly among the guests, and Jacob wiped tears from his eyes as Fiona walked toward Luke. Luke wore a new suit, but still kept his old boots, making Fiona laugh. She wore a simple white dress with wildflowers in her hair. When they spoke their vows, Luke whispered for only her to hear, "I will be your calm. Always." 5 years passed with peace settling into their lives like soft morning light. The ranch they built thrived. Children's laughter filled the air as their son Daniel, now 3, learned to ride his pony with Luke's steady instructions. Their baby daughter, Rebecca, toddled across the porch and climbed into Fiona's lap. Fiona opened a small school for children in the valley, teaching without fear. Luke helped struggling families with land and livestock, known across the territory for his fairness and quiet strength. Sometimes news still came about the railroad. Some men were jailed, some escaped justice, but the worst of the harm had been stopped. And with each year, the past lost its hold on Fiona. One spring afternoon, Luke returned from the fields, with Daniel riding proudly beside him. Fiona met them on the porch, Rebecca at her side. Luke kissed Fiona, then wrapped an arm around her as the children played. "How are my girls?" he asked softly. "Happy," Fiona said, leaning into his embrace, "and very grateful." The sky turned golden as the sun dipped, painting the valley in warm colors. Peace wrapped around them like a blanket. Fiona thought of the frightened woman she once was, running, hunted, believing she would never be safe again. "They said I'd never find peace," she whispered. Luke kissed the top of her head. "They were wrong." Fiona smiled, resting against the man who kept his promise from the very beginning. "You're my calm," she said, "always."